Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm taking a look at Yelena. Yelena is one of two characters that got a tier 4 this update, the other one being Red Guardian, but unlike Red Guardian, Yelena actually has a higher level PvP kit because she has an iframe ignore. That's really kind of the barrier for entry nowadays for a character to have at least mid or higher level value in PvP. It doesn't seem like too many people are rushing out to cover Yelena or make videos about her. One of the reasons is probably because she is a speed female character, and with her kit not really stacked up for PvE, she's not really going to be excelling or be meta there, especially when you have high level performers like Luna Snow. On the other end, in PvP, she's mostly going to be somewhere around the mid-level at most because she doesn't have any unique or special effect to kind of push her into the higher levels of the PvP meta. She obviously doesn't have Revive or Immortality or any kind of other unique special effect that would allow her to basically compete at that stage. On top of that, with Sentry getting a new uniform and easily pushing to the top of the meta, he basically just overshadows her, and most people are going to be focused on catching up on other characters that they didn't tier 4 before, or figuring out what other builds to fix, and so on and so forth. So that is why I'm obviously going to be covering the character to showcase how she does, and maybe give you an idea whether you want to upgrade her or not. For the most part, I don't think too many people are going to be upgrading her because frankly her kit doesn't really cut it for a premium character. If she was kind of a normal character that wasn't a more premium cost, maybe she could be okay, but I honestly think that the devs should really consider buffing her, considering that she is a premium character and considering that she is kind of the spotlight character for a major MCU movie. And when I say that the character should get buffed, I don't just mean in PvP, where I obviously tested more extensively in, but also PvE, because her performance wasn't really that great, and you can see what I mean from these clips. Keep in mind that all the testing that I did throughout the entire video is done without a damage proc. The CTP that I have equipped on her is a mighty CTP of Conquest, though I don't necessarily think that that is the most ideal one for PvP, but I'll talk about that soon enough. And to give you some perspective on how much the new uniform upgrades her PvE performance, I first took her into a stage 29 of Null with the old Synergy uniform that was more so for PvE, since there was also a Synergy uniform for PvP too. With that old uniform and no leadership or supports active, I was able to complete stage 29, but only did so with a little over 10 seconds remaining, which obviously isn't great. With the new uniform and the exact same conditions, I'm able to complete the stage around 40 seconds faster. And this would be an okay PvE improvement if the character was already completing this stage relatively quickly, but that's not the case because she's doing it with around 50 seconds remaining. Other characters who aren't even premium cost are able to do this with at least a minute and 30 seconds remaining, sometimes even less than that, being able to complete it with 2 minutes remaining, or doing it within basically 3 minutes. She's taking over 4 minutes to do the same thing. And again, she is a premium cost character. And if the argument is that her PvE performance is limited because this is a PvP uniform, that's not really a valid case, as you'll see in the PvP testing. If you want to use the character specifically for PvE, which I don't recommend given her current performance, I'd probably say that a CTP of Rage is your best bet, since she has a bunch of skills that you have to delay cancel to make the most out of her skill rotation. Taking her to level 80 obviously improved her performance, and she was able to clear this exact same stage around a minute and 50 seconds faster than before. Her skill rotation isn't the best, and I'm not sure if this is the most ideal one, but the one that I went with is to quick cancel the first and second skill, then you do the third skill, you delay cancel it after she starts shooting the rocket, then you go into your fourth skill and delay cancel that after you see her kind of jump over the boss or opponent or whatever it is, and then you immediately go into the fifth skill. When you have your awakening skill, you basically just do the exact same rotation and then finish off with the sixth skill, and if or when you get her tier 4, you basically just activate it whenever it's up so that you can spam the striker more often. If the devs easily wanted to improve her PvE performance, one of the things that they could do is make the sixth skill immediately cancelable like most other awakening skills are now. The skill is very long in terms of animation, so it's kind of questionable whether you actually want to use that skill or not. it would be a lot better if you could just immediately cancel it and layer it on top of the other skills. One of the other things that the devs could change is to make it so that the 5th skill, single skill damage proc, is actually applied for 2 skills. Because the 5th skill activates so quickly, you can't really transfer that single skill proc onto another skill like the awakening skill, for example. It just immediately gets erased if you try to go 5 cancel into another skill. And you could say that they could try to delay the 5th skill so that you can transfer that proc, but that could impact your performance in PvP. So it would be a lot better if they just made the proc activate for 2 skills instead. That way you can do 5 and go into another skill after it, and it wouldn't erase everything. Obviously, to better showcase her PvE upgrade once she gets to tier 4, I need to go to higher stages because the lower stages get cleared too quickly. So I went to a stage 99. This time I added a leadership and support combo with Shuri as well as another support. But sadly, she couldn't complete the first phase in under 2 minutes, meaning that she wouldn't be able to complete the fight entirely. So I just stopped recording after she got to that 30 health bar mark. Taking her to tier 4, she does gain decent stat increases. Her HP went up by around 30,000 for me, and her attack increased by around 16,000, which again is pretty solid, I would say. But the issue with her tier 4 upgrade is her actual tier 4 skill. It provides her with an attack increase and a damage increase for opponents or bosses, I guess, if they are under the 50% health bar mark. The problem with this is that the tier 4 skill is aimed primarily for PvE, and even then it's restricted to content like World Boss Legend or World Boss Ultimate, since it doesn't ever apply to ABX or ABL, considering that the bosses or opponent's health bar is never under 50% health. This is an issue because the character isn't situated for PvE currently, and for PvP it doesn't really help her out because the opponent also has to be under 50% health. So if she triggers her tier 4 skill, you get no value out of it because the opponent has to be under 50% health. Yeah, you do gain the attack increase, but what the character really lacks and basically needs is survivability. She doesn't have the dodge artifact similar to Black Widow, or have those extra dodge layers like Black Widow has when she activates her tier 4. The reason that Black Widow is so much better than her in PvP, at least you'll see soon enough, is because she has access to those survivability layers, and characters who don't have revive or immortality basically need those other abilities to compete with higher level meta characters. If they just have offense stats, the stronger characters will basically just one-shot them and they'll never get to the tier 4 anyway. So the devs would have to give them more survivability to be able to survive those one-shots and snowball to compete at that higher meta level. In terms of the striker options, you can use pretty much whatever is your best PvE one. Probably will be either Thor, Ghost Rider, or Black Widow. But for PvP, considering that she has that cruelty instinct, you can go for characters like Carnage or even ones like Ant-Man. Both of them have iframe ignore and do decent damage or have a damage proc on their skill, or striker skill rather. With the tier 4 upgrade, I was able to complete the first phase about a minute faster than before, and being able to complete it in under that 2-minute window means that I can obviously complete the fight entirely. And I was able to complete this stage with about a minute remaining, and you might think that that's decent for a character without a damage proc, but it actually isn't very good. For this same exact setup with Elektra, and again no damage proc, I was actually able to complete this stage, if you watch that video, with a little over 2 minutes remaining. And even for the new Black Widow uniform, the symbiote one, I was able to complete the stage again with the exact same setup with around a minute and 50 seconds remaining. So both of those uniforms which aren't premium can complete the stage a minute faster or more. And what's worse than that is that Black Widow is easily better than Yelena in PvP, and I would argue that Elektra is as well, but again, you'll see that from the PvP testing soon enough. It doesn't really get any better with her Alliance Battle Extreme performance. She's obviously competing versus some really heavy hitters in the speed female category, and without a damage proc and not being tier 4 yet, I was only able to score around 8 million and even struggled to do that with a double support and leadership setup. Getting her to tier 4 didn't really change much because of the reason that I mentioned before. The tier 4 skill, at least the damage portion, doesn't apply to alliance battle bosses because their health never goes under 50% health, so you only gain the benefit of the attack increase and obviously the striker that is coming out during the tier 4 skill. So the lack of skills that you can cancel on top of one another, or the hit count, and the fact that you can't cancel the awakening skill either, or get the max benefit out of the tier 4 skill, means that this character just really will have minimal value in alliance battle modes. And for newer players who don't have characters like Luna and stuff like that, this really shouldn't be something that you look at if that's something you're considering. Again, with that double support and leadership setup and having the tier 4, I was barely able to go past 9 million and even reach 10 million, something that I can do with other characters who aren't necessarily tier 4. Yelena's saving grace is her value in PvP, but even that is limited, and her performance isn't as good as it should be for a premium character, since that definitely is a factor for people in terms of the character that they pick up and upgrade. You can see from these initial tests that I don't have Yelena at tier 4 right away. I wanted to see how she would do at level 80 versus either level 80 characters or tier 4 ones. And you can see that she can take out at least one life of some of these characters, including the old uniform for Sentry and even Silver Surfer and Adam Warlock, but doesn't necessarily close it out by taking out both of their lives. You can definitely see that Yelena has potential for PvP given her current kit and all the positives and things she has for it, including iframe ignore, which, as I mentioned previously, is basically a barrier for entry for characters now to be able to compete at least at the mid-level of PvP. She also has the other standard effects for PvP that allow her to compete, such as penetration to all sources, damage reduction, healing, and even long or full iframes to avoid damage and hide behind. I would say that the tier 4 does help her performance in PvP. I was actually able to test her out versus Sentry with a newer uniform where she previously just couldn't really do anything. Even with the tier 4 upgrade, oftentimes you don't want to do this matchup since Sentry can basically just delete her, but I did find that sometimes she was able to take out one life of Sentry. It probably just came down to luck or the rotations kind of matching up when Sentry was out of iframes for her to do damage, but regardless, she was able to take at least one life of him at tier 4 where she previously couldn't. Just take that with a grain of salt. You don't want to tier 4 her to match her up versus Sentry. You're going to have a bad time, but I just showcased that to put into perspective that the tier 4 does have some kind of value in terms of improving her performance versus at least some of the higher metas that either have more health or you get them more damage to be able to take out one of their lives more consistently. However, despite the fact that Yelena does have all of the good effects that you need for PvP and can sometimes take out one or two lives of certain meta characters, overall there are some glaring issues with her kit that really keep her back and really shouldn't be issues for a character that again is a premium one. She should be able to perform a little bit better than certain characters like Elektra, for example, or maybe characters like Punisher, Daredevil to an extent, because she has that premium kind of pricing that should in some ways guarantee a little bit more value than them. But the major issues with Yelena are attributed either to her AI rotation or the way that the effects are stacked onto her skills. She'll open with her second skill, which is her iframe ignore, because opponents will often immediately go into iframe, so that's good. But then she'll only go into her fifth skill if the opponent is out of iframe. And the reason that this is an issue is because the fifth skill has invincibility on it and healing. So if the opponent just constantly goes into iframe or interrupts her, then she won't go into that fifth skill to gain the healing from it and the invincible, and she won't have the sustain to be able to keep fighting the opponent because she'll just keep spamming the second skill. And although the second and fifth skill are full iframes, if she just keeps using the second skill, most other mid to high level characters have sustain either through going into their own iframe ignore that has healing on it or have it passively, and will basically just whittle down her health and take her down that way. And if she stays alive longer, her tier 4 won't really help her in any way, and the awakening skill is just way too slow of an animation that will lock her out of healing and doesn't really do enough damage. if it gets cancelled, it'll just do 0 damage and she'll just go back into rotation. Whereas for other characters whose awakening skill gets cancelled, it'll still be active there, so they can go into their other skills and stack up the damage. This poses other issues as well, because her not rotating into other skills, like the 3rd skill for example, means she doesn't gain damage accumulation. Her not going into the 4th skill means she doesn't gain an attack increase or invisibility that would basically make her almost indefinitely in iframe. And not using the 5th skill not only locks her out of sustainability, but she also doesn't gain that big damage increase either to be able to, in some ways, one-shot or 0 a character's health. And on top of all this, if she's not rotating through these skills, she doesn't fill up that tier 4 skill to be able to activate that. And even though the tier 4 skill doesn't really do much for her, the striker skill can at least provide her with some decent damage on top of her skills. This is why the 2 most ideal CTPs that I could recommend for her are either a CTP of Conquest or a CTP of Authority. I went with a CTP of Conquest first, just to get that little bit of extra survivability up front, since you don't have to wait to fill up the top proc to gain that kind of pseudo immortality from the steal effect that you would if you had an Authority. So you get that wall effect from the Conquest, and it also kind of boosts up a little bit of the healing if you get that, and also improves her damage a little bit more when that triggers as well. But I'm not entirely sure if this is the most ideal, because like I mentioned, if you get locked out of the 5th skill, you're not really going to be healing much anyway and not making too much out of the recovery that you get from Conquest, but instead you can get the actual invincibility proc from the CTP of Authority and eventually kind of build up that steal proc, since she does have 30% damage reduction. You can get close to 90% if you get a brilliant one and get 60%. So that does work for her pretty well, and you also get the damage accumulation that she doesn't have because she doesn't use the 3rd skill. If you find her survival isn't good enough anyway, you could try to double down with something like a CTP of Greed or Destruction, though I would think that for characters who are a little bit stronger, they will activate their iframe ignore more frequently, so you will need the extra survivability from something like an Authority or a CTP of Conquest. Other CTPs like a Regen or Refinement I don't really think are going to cut it, because her base HP pool isn't that high anyway, and like I mentioned, if she doesn't go into the 5th skill, you're basically gaining nothing from the recovery rate on those CTPs. You obviously don't want to use Yelena in Timeline because she doesn't have those meta stats that all the other characters have, but if you were to use her in manual play, she is a lot better than she is on auto, because you can actually spam through her different skills. And you can actually take out some of the top metas without too much effort. All you really have to do is go into your 2nd skill first, so that you can have your iframe ignore, and then go into your 5th skill after to gain the invincibility and healing. Often after that, if you've taken down the opponent, you want to open with the 4th skill and cancel it into your 5th skill or 2nd skill, so that you gain that invisibility and then can go into your iframes, your healing, invincibility, and your iframe ignore. But if you're facing off versus characters like Sentry for some insane reason, then you want to do something like immediately opening with your 5th skill and then going into your 2nd skill, so that you can transfer that damage proc and damage on the ground to the 2nd skill to burst down Sentry. Or alternatively, you could try to go into the 2nd skill to get that iframe ignore, connect with the opponent, and then hit them with the 5th skill with the damage from that. Oftentimes, it's mostly just going to be the 2nd or 5th skill that does that. And like I mentioned, you try to spam the 4th skill whenever you can at the start of the fight before the opponent has spawned in, to gain that invisibility and have more chances to hide in iframes and avoid damage. Unfortunately, I couldn't get enough variation in testing in Alliance Conquest to have kind of a thorough understanding of how she does relative to some other speed types, but I did notice again that versus characters like Adam Warlock, she won't really have the sustain to be able to consistently take them out, or possibly sometimes even take out one life, because she'll struggle to go into her 5th skill as often as Adam Warlock can heal and go through his rotations. She obviously has the capability of taking out some of the strong blast types, but it doesn't seem like she has the damage, AoE, or lingering damage from her skills, because they don't really cancel to take out multiple meta characters within that same team. Based off these immediate tests, I would say that Yelena is probably a bit behind Electra, Elektra was able to take out multiple meta characters in the same team that also included blast types, and was even able to go toe-to-toe with Deadpool at one point from the test that I did. Yelena can't really do that because she doesn't have the sustainability. You can see that in this clip in particular. She was able to take out the first team, but that poor awakening skill in the second fight just kind of devastates her, and she doesn't have the sustainability to come back from being locked down from characters like Jean, or getting hit from kind of a stray iframe ignore that might have super guard break. I will say that I am disappointed in this uniform. I was expecting much more from a character that is the major spotlight for a big MCU movie and is a premium character, but I don't really feel like I could recommend it to other players because she is basically lackluster in PvE. She's basically non-existent as an ABX or ABL character choice, and her performance in PvP is worse than characters who aren't premium. Characters like Elektra, for example, outperform her, Punisher, and even Daredevil with or without the supports from the Defenders or the Team Up collection. It's very possible that with the part 2 of this update that there are enough synergies or supports to boost her up. Maybe she gets something crazy with them and potentially gets boosted even further with the Team Up collection, but the base kit just isn't really right, and I really think that the devs should update her or patch her before or during the part 2 update to improve her performance, not only in PvE but also PvP. For PvE, as I mentioned at the start of the video, all they really need to do is have the 5th skill have 2 skills that the damage proc applies to, and try to make the Awaken skill actually be cancelable so that you can stack on more skills on top of one another. On top of this, they could try to increase the hit count of the Awaken skill and probably some of her base skills too. For PvP, the most ideal change that they can make, in my opinion, is to add another heal to the 2nd skill or move the heal from the 5th skill to the 2nd skill. On top of this, they should consider adding super guard break to one of the skills, considering that characters who, again, aren't premium actually have this and she doesn't. If they wanted to go a step further, they could also revise the artifact to actually provide that additional dodge layer similar to Spider-Man's artifact or Black Widow's. That would suit the character much more, especially because she is also a Widow character. And if they even wanted to go a step further past this, then the tier 4 could be revised to provide some additional kind of survivability, such as invisibility when the skill is active for the entire duration of the tier 4 skill, and also maybe something like some kind of passive healing when the character goes invisible for a set period of time. So that could activate with the tier 4 skill, or potentially even be active afterwards when the character just goes into iframes, or potentially the 4th skill. But really she just needs that healing or some healing on the 2nd skill and potentially a super guard break there to have enough sustainability to compete with other characters. That's Yelena for you. Doesn't really stack up versus Black Widow. Again, just doesn't really make sense to me because she is a premium character and Black Widow isn't. Doesn't even really compare too much versus some of the other free characters either, like Elektra. But that's my take on it. I just think that the character should be buffed. If you found this video entertaining or found the information useful, then please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with others. Maybe they want to know how Yelena performs and want to know if they should get the uniform or avoid her. Probably avoid her. Either way, please consider sharing that with others. Helps them, and it can help my channel grow so I can make more content like this. Either way, I always appreciate people taking the time to watch my videos, so thank you. But the video is now over.